All right, well, thank you everyone for attending. I'm glad that even though there's snow outside, you're able to get on your computer. What I want to do today is really just an introduction to the course. So we'll go through some of the content and the mechanics on how it will work. And then I want to cover a little bit of my background so you know kind of what expertise I bring to the course, as well as maybe what shortcomings in my experience there might be. So we'll focus on some of those areas. And then lastly, I want to hear from you all kind of what you've done with open source development, how much Python you know, and what you're really hoping to get out of the course. So we'll go ahead and get started then. I'm sure everyone has found the website. You can go to https opensourcecourse.dev, and this will give you an overview of what we're hoping to cover. So first of all, let's talk about the learning objectives. The first learning objective is to be able to use the Git version control system. So some of you have probably had some experience with that. Others maybe not so much, but we'll use some of the basic features that are fairly common, and you'll know enough to kind of Google your way out of other problems you might run into. The second objective is to develop a sense of Pythonic code. So what I mean by that is, how do you optimally use the Python language, kind of the way the developers intended, or what are some of the nice features that allow you to express complex concepts really concisely? And then what are the community coding styles that are common in scientific Python, and how can we kind of make our code conform to that, to look, to use the language as well as we can, and then to look professional in addition to that. So the third objective will cover some important object-oriented features and some functional features built into Python. Now, this isn't really a computer science course, so we're not going to dive deep into object-oriented theory or functional programming theory, but we're just going to look at some high-level features that are useful when you're designing APIs, especially for scientific libraries. The fourth objective is to understand testing philosophies and how to use the PyTest framework. So we'll talk about general concepts in software testing and reliability, and then we'll zoom in and really just get some practice with one of the most popular frameworks for doing that in Python, which is called the PyTest framework. Next, we'll talk about documentation. So we're going to cover 3 levels of documentation in Python. We'll talk about code comments and how to effectively do that, as well as variable naming and that sort of thing. We'll talk about doc strings, and that's how you attach documentation to particular Python objects. And then we'll talk about how to make a README for a package. We're going to stop short of kind of comprehensive package documentation that you might build in Markdown, for example, just because there isn't really time for this short of a course. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the collaborative development practices, particularly how to use GitHub to work together to develop codes. So the prerequisites, this course really isn't a beginning Python course, so I'm kind of expecting that you have some level of experience with it. Particularly, you should be able to write functions. You should be familiar with the built-in data structures like sets, dictionaries, tuples, and so on. Also understanding how iteration works, simple for loops, control flow, if, then, else, that sort of thing, these basic programming building blocks. Also how to manage Python environments and be comfortable installing packages, and then also be able to use the command line. So if anyone doesn't quite meet those prerequisites, I'm not going to kick anyone out of the course. You can definitely come talk to me, and I'll help you find some resources that we can use to kind of catch up, some remedial type work, but you will have to spend additional time to kind of get caught up to this base level. All right, so the course structure is really broken into 7 modules, and each module you can see on the left here. They closely follow the learning objectives. Each module has an overview. So this is something that you should look at before class. There will be, a couple paragraphs of what this is all about. Then there will be a couple of readings, and these readings are short. It's typically like a Stack Overflow question, a blog post, or maybe even a short YouTube video. And so I don't anticipate that'll take much time to go through those, but please look at the overview and the readings before each module. And then there's a slides component. So these are the actual slides that I'll present in class when we lecture. And I'll show you an example of how to navigate the slides in a minute. And then each module has an exercise associated with it. I've designed these exercises to not take too long, but to try to capture the essence of the material in the module. So when I went through them, I was able to do all of them in between 15 minutes to an hour. So I don't anticipate it will take more than maybe 3 hours. So 1 to 3 hours is probably what you'd expect to spend on the modules or on the exercises for each module. And then finally, there's a project. So the last assignment is to propose some kind of contribution to an open source package, or you can propose creating your own. And so this will be something that will be useful to you to kind of learn how to do it in real life, how to really engage with the open source ecosystem. But it will also be helpful to have something to show on your CV or on your resume that you do know how to kind of meet a minimum threshold for software engineering, and you know how to collaborate with others as well. So we'll talk more about that later in the course, but that just gives you an idea of what the kind of capstone project is or what you're building towards. So you might be asking, this isn't really for credit. You're not going to get an A, B, or C, whatever, if you do it or don't do it. So you're welcome to engage with this as much as you'd like, but we do have some incentives for people who complete each of the assignments and then also complete this project. The department has offered some funding so that we can buy some textbooks. And so if you complete all of this, you'll get the satisfaction of knowing you did it. You'll learn skills better than not completing all of it. And then you'll also get a textbook. All right, so getting help, I have office hours posted on the student discussion board. You're also welcome to come by if I have earbuds in or headphones on. I'm really trying to focus on something, so maybe don't interrupt me if I'm doing that. But if I'm just there and I don't have headphones in, you can just ask a question whenever. That's fine. Also, this is intended to be very collaborative. So if you notice a typo, I normally don't write typos, but I left a few in here for some lucky students to find so they can contribute to the content. If you find a typo, you can actually just edit the content of the course. Clicking on this page, for example, this will take you right to the GitHub source file for that particular web page, and then you can just edit it right there and propose a change. So it's very easy to contribute to. All right, so let's take a look at one of the modules. So this is the style module, for example. At the start, I have this kind of silly AI generated image that I was kind of having fun playing around with. And then there's also a motivational quote. Here's some of the introduction, the objectives, and then here's the reading that I was talking about. So you'll just want to look at this page over before the module, before the date that we go over it in class. And then if you click on slides here, or conversely, you can click down here on the next button. It'll take you to the same place. This brings us to a Reveal.js slide deck. And a few things to note here. First is on the bottom. This will take you back to the overview like I just did. This will get you the source file for these slides. So if you want to propose a change, this is really just a markdown file, separate headings for each slide. So they're very easy to edit as well. You can click that button there. And then exercises will take you from the slides to the exercises of the same module that you're in. You'll also notice these arrows on the bottom right here. So this is kind of jumping around, showing you that you can go to the right. During class, we'll progress from left to right, and that will be the slides that I cover. But you'll notice that occasionally there are some down slides. So right here, for example, you can see this down and up arrow. So a down slide is typically going to be something that might be like extra material we don't have time to cover. It might be some historical fact that you might find interesting, or it might just dive more in depth on some of the commands, for example, showing some of the flags do and so on. So these might be useful for, say, a task or in one of the homework assignments that you're doing afterwards for the corresponding module. All right, so I think that's about it for the slides. If you click on the exercises, you'll notice that it just redirects you to the student discussion board. So let's go check that out. All right, this is the main place that we'll go for information on when we meet, on the assignments. If you have a question that isn't particularly private or something like that, you can just ask it here. Other students can help you with the assignments and so on. Right here under each under the course outline, it shows what we'll cover in each week. And then under each module, there's an assignment link and it tells you when it's due. So if you click on one of these assignments, what it does is it will launch some features of GitHub Classroom where it's going to create a new repository in the open source course organization. And then that will be, so that'll take a second here. Okay, so that's done and it gives you a URL for this new repository that it created. So you'll just click on that and then only the instructors and the student will have access to this. So this is kind of a private repo shared between the two. It will walk you through what the assignment's all about, how to do it. Typically, it will involve creating a pull request, and then I'll just come in and comment on the pull request. It also has some auto grading for the stuff that's easy to set up code to correct how well you're doing. And then you can also use that to check throughout if you're passing all the tests, if the linter's passing, and so on. And I'll explain what that means more a little bit later on. But I think that should be everything you need to know about the mechanics of the course.